Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are really getting into something fundamental, I think. We're exploring the art of conversation
Mm.
and not just small talk. We're looking at what makes someone a genuinely amazing conversationalist. You know, how you can build rapport, create connections, whether it's for work or just, well, life.
Right. And our mission today is really practical. We've dug into some expert resources to pull out a framework for you. This isn't about memorizing vocabulary.
No.
This is about the mindset, the linguistic tools you can use to avoid those awkward silences, those conversational dead ends we all know and hate.
The wall.
Exactly, the wall. We're going to focus a lot on how to actually structure your questions and, this is key, how to find and build on common ground.
So for anyone who's ever had a conversation just fizzle out after a couple of minutes, this deep dive is, well, it's for you. Okay, so let's jump right in with the biggest problem, the one everyone faces. The source material calls it the devil, which I think is perfect.
The yes-no trap.
The yes-no trap. It's the ultimate conversation killer, isn't it? If you ask a question and the answer can just be yes or no,
It's over.
it's over. And then you have to restart the whole engine again, and it's exhausting for everyone.
Well, and those closed questions, they have a purpose, right? If you need a fact,
Yeah,
did you enjoy your flight? Is this your first time here? They're efficient for information gathering.
but they're terrible for connection.
Terrible. Catastrophic even. They
Yeah.
just create these stops and starts that drain all the energy from the interaction. So moving from just getting facts to actually building a relationship, that needs a totally different questioning strategy.
And the source material highlights two really powerful ways to do this. They're connected, but they serve different purposes. One is about unlocking someone's deepest aspirations.
And the other is about maintaining that day-to-day conversational flow. So let's start with the deeper one, the one about aspirations.
Yeah.
Hashtag tagged 1.1, the power of hypothetical questions.
All right, so the first major technique is using the power of hypothetical questions. This is where you really move beyond just, how was your weekend?
It's a shift, isn't it? You're moving the conversation from the present reality, which can be kind of mundane,
Yeah, what you're doing.
to what you wish you were doing. Potential futures, inner desires.
Yeah.
And to do that, you need a specific kind of language.
This is where grammar actually becomes a tool for connection, which I find fascinating. The source is really clear on this.
It is. It says you have to get comfortable with the conditional tenses. If you could, what would you do? That kind of structure.
And it makes perfect sense when you think about it. Using that language, the if-would structure, it's a signal. You're telling the other person, hey, we're stepping out of reality for a moment.
This is a safe space.
Exactly. It's a safe space.
Hmm.
I'm not asking what's your job, which is about your current, maybe frustrating reality. I'm asking, if you could have any job in the world, what would it be? We're exploring possibilities now.
And the psychological safety that creates is just immense.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you ask about someone's current job, you're inviting all sorts of baggage, right? Judgment, comparison, maybe they hate their job, maybe they just got fired.
Oh, God, yeah. The worst.
But an imaginary scenario, there's no judgment there. You're giving them permission to talk about their values, their dreams. You get to see their real character, not just their job title.
And the source has this perfect example. The question is asked, if you could have any job in the world, what would it be?
And the answer wasn't, astronaut or movie star.
The answer was a reconstructive plastic surgeon, which is, it's so specific.
It is, and that's the hook. That's the fun fact. But the real magic is in the follow-up question, the why.
Right. And the anecdote goes on to say that the person's motivation was this deep desire to help people rebuild their faces after accidents, after trauma.
And just like that, you've learned something profound about them. You've learned about their compassion, their desire to serve, things that would normally take weeks, maybe months of small talk to even get close to.
You've bypassed all the surface level stuff. And your job as the conversationalist then is to dig into that. Wow, that's fascinating. What is it about reconstruction specifically, not cosmetic surgery, that appeals to you? You see, the hypothetical just opens a door.
It's the fuel. And the follow-up questions keep the conversation in flight. The other example they gave was just as good,
The lottery one.
the lottery one. If you won the lottery, what would you do? What would you buy first? Again, you're removing the constraints of everyday life. Money isn't an object, so what are your true priorities?
And the answer in the source was so telling. First thing, pay off their parents' mortgage.
Which immediately shows a sense of family, of responsibility, of gratitude.
But then it got even more interesting. The person said they'd do secret deeds. They wouldn't even tell anyone they'd won. They'd just quietly help people.
So now you know they're not just family-oriented, They're also humble, generous, and they value privacy. You've just unlocked their entire value system with one simple hypothetical question.
It's so powerful, but I can see a language learner thinking, oh, but my grammar, my conditional tenses aren't perfect.
And that's a really important point.
Yeah.
The source implies that you should try anyway. Even if the grammar is a bit clunky, the intent of the question is so powerful that people will understand.
They'll appreciate the effort.
They'll appreciate that you're trying to engage them on a deeper level.
Yeah.
You're showing you care about their dreams, not just their to-do list.
So, okay, hypotheticals are the tool for getting deep. But you can't just ask those all the time. You need something for the normal flow of conversation.
Right. And that brings us to the second big questioning technique. Hashtag tag tag 1.2, using open-ended questions for continuous flow. So we're moving now to what the source calls tip 6. This is the real workhorse of conversation, I think. It's all about using open-ended questions.
This is the technique you use to keep the rally going, to use a tennis metaphor.
That's a great way to put it. A closed question is when the point just ends. Bam. Silence. An open-ended question is like a deep serve that forces the other person to actually move and make a return.
And the whole goal, as the source says, is to phrase the question in a way that your partner has no way out.
I love that phrasing. No way out. They literally can't answer with a single word. They have to give you something to work with, a little story, a list, an opinion.
So let's look at the contrast. A closed question. Did you enjoy your trip to the mountains?
Answer, yes. Followed by...
Awkward silence while you scramble for the next question.
Right. So we have to retrain our brains to convert those dead-end questions into conversation starters. And the source says the magic words are what and how.
Because they force description. They make the other person search their memory for details. So instead of, do you like London?
The ultimate dead-end question.
Yeah, you pivot to something like, so what do you like most about London? Or, and I like this one, it adds a little bit of creative tension, what do you like least about London?
Asking about the extremes is so smart. The best or the worst. Because that forces an emotional, descriptive answer. It's never just a fact. It's a story with feeling.
And that story is full of hooks for you to grab onto for the next part of the conversation. It's like a closed question gives you one dry fact. An open question gives you a whole basket of topics to choose from.
That's the real secret, I think. The transition power.
Yeah.
The answer you get from an open-ended question is the fuel for the next technique, which is about finding similarity.
Okay, let's play that out. I ask you, what do you like least about London?
And I say, ugh, honestly, the queuing. Standing in line for everything, especially for coffee in the morning, it drives me crazy.
Okay, see, now I don't have to invent a new topic. I can immediately connect with that. I can say, oh, I am totally with you on that. I feel like I waste half my morning in a queue. Which coffee shop is the worst for it?
And boom, we're in a conversation. You took my answer, you validated it by agreeing, and then use another specific open question to keep it going. That's the engine. That what and how structure just keeps things moving smoothly.
And let's not forget about how. How questions are great because they get people to talk about process, about effort.
People love talking about their processes.
They do. Instead of, did you finish that big project, which is a yes-no question, you ask, how on earth did you manage to finish that project on time? The deadline was insane.
Yes. Now they get to be the hero of their own story. They can talk about the challenges, how they solved them, the late nights. You're not just asking for a status update. You're inviting them to share their victory.
It's so much more flattering, isn't it?
It is. It shows you're interested in the effort behind the achievement, not just the achievement itself. You're signaling that their experience is worth explaining in detail.
This all leads us perfectly into the next section, which is less about the mechanics of a sentence and more about the psychology of connection.
Right. How do you actually build rapport and trust? It's not just about keeping the conversation going. It's about making it meaningful.
And it comes back to a really simple human truth. People, for the most part, like talking more than they like listening.
They do. So if you can structure the conversation to let them talk, to make them feel heard and valued, you're already winning. The next couple of tips are all about tapping into those basic human needs. Hashtag 2.1, emphasizing similarity.
Okay, so this next principle is, it's almost embarrassingly simple, but so many people forget to do it.
It's pure psychology. People like people who are like them. Full stop.
So your job in a conversation is to actively listen for and then point out any shared interests, opinions, even small frustrations. You're basically saying, hey, we're on the same team, you're understood.
And if you find a point of agreement but you stay silent about it, You're just missing this huge opportunity to build a bond. The source says you have to make the agreement explicit. You have to say it out loud.
It's so powerful that the source even points out how this is used in professional settings, like in sales.
Oh, the mirroring technique,
Yes.
where skilled salespeople will subtly mimic the body language of a client, their posture, their hand gestures.
And the client doesn't even notice it consciously, but their brain picks it up. It registers sameness, and that builds trust. It's fascinating.
Luckily, in conversation, you don't have to start copying how someone crosses their arms. You just have to use your words. When they say something you agree with, you have to verbally build that bridge between you.
So let's run that through our earlier example. I've asked an open question. What was the biggest challenge you faced in school? And they say something like, definitely trying to focus during online classes and the pandemic.
And let's say you also found that incredibly difficult. You can't just nod.
No, you have to jump in with one of those specific phrases the source recommends.
Phrases that are basically verbal glue. Things like, yes, I totally agree with you on that.
Or, wow, we're really similar on that point.
We think so similarly about that. Or, my favorite, I'm on the same page as you.
Using those phrases instantly validates their experience. It's not just, I had this problem. It's now, we shared this struggle. And that's a much stronger bond.
It completely changes the dynamic. It goes from two people exchanging information to two people building a shared story. And that validation is one of the fastest ways to make someone feel comfortable with you.
It also helps the conversation move forward, doesn't it? If I explicitly agree with you, you don't feel the need to keep defending or explaining your point.
Exactly. The pressure's off. You feel understood, so we can move on to the next related idea. It's actually an act of conversational generosity. Hashtag 2.2, asking for advice.
All right, our next technique, tip 7 from the source, might be the most powerful one for building trust quickly. It's about asking for advice.
This is a huge one. Because when you ask someone for their advice, you're paying them a massive social compliment.
What do you mean by that?
Well, you're signaling respect.
Yeah.
You're saying, I value your experience and your judgment so much that I'm willing to be vulnerable and ask for your help.
So it elevates their status in the conversation.
It totally does. The psychological benefit is immediate. You make your conversation partner feel knowledgeable, wise, important. You're inviting them into your decision-making process, which is a really powerful way to connect.
It's also a great way to rebalance the conversation, isn't it? If you feel like you've been talking about your own problems for too long.
It's the perfect way to pass the baton, as the source puts it. You shift from a monologue about your problem to a collaborative brainstorming session. It puts the focus back on them and their expertise.
The key, though, is how you phrase it. You don't want to be clunky about it.
Right. The direct approach, what is your advice, can feel a bit intimidating, like you're putting them on the spot.
So the source suggests softening it, personalizing it, something like, so what would you do in my situation? Or what would you do if you were me?
It's more imaginative. It invites them to step into your shoes, which often leads to more thoughtful advice anyway.
And there was that other, more playful example for when you don't have a big, serious problem.
Yes, I love this one, where you just express a general curiosity and ask for their insight. The example they used was intentionally a bit silly.
I've always wondered why there are so many pigeons in England. Maybe you could offer some insight on that.
It's ridiculous, but the technique is sound. You're making them the expert, even if it's on something as trivial as urban wildlife. You're showing that you're curious and you value what they might know. It's a low-stakes way of saying, I value your input.
But that raises a really important question, one the source doesn't really get into.
Go on.
What happens if the advice they give you is, well, terrible?
Haha. Yeah, that's a minefield. You've just built all this rapport by asking for their wisdom, and now you have to figure out how to say thanks, but no thanks.
Exactly. Does asking for advice just open you up to a whole new kind of awkwardness?
I think the key is to remember that the act of asking is often more important for the relationship than the advice itself. If the advice is bad, you don't have to take it, but you do have to honor the fact that they gave you their time and thought.
So you validate the effort, not necessarily the content.
Precisely. You can say something like, wow, that's a really interesting way of looking at it. Thank you for giving me so much to think about. You're showing appreciation for the exchange without committing to their terrible idea. The goal was connection, not a perfect solution.
That's a great distinction. You're honoring the connection, not the advice. Okay, moving into our next section, we're tackling something a bit more nuanced. It's about how things beyond the words you use can make or break a conversation.
Yeah, this is where we get into cultural norms and just general sensitivity. You can have the best intentions in the world, but if you're not aware of these things, you can still create a lot of awkwardness.
And the first point is something I had honestly never even thought about before. It's not about the words, but the sounds between the words. Hashtag 3.1 cultural awareness of thinking sounds.
This is tip 3 from the source, and it's such a fascinating, subtle insight. The core idea is that the little sounds we make when we're thinking, our pause fillers, are not universal.
They vary hugely from culture to culture, and if you're not aware of it, it can be a little bit jarring.
The source contrasts, for example, the sounds you might hear in Spain. It describes them as a more open-mouthed, a very kind of open sound,
And then it compares that to what it calls the British consciousness.
which is a very real thing. There's a sort of cultural norm in Britain about keeping your mouth closed, don't talk with your mouth full, that kind of thing.
And that apparently applies to thinking, too. So a British person is much more likely to use a closed-mouth thinking sound, an or an or a
It's a nasal sound or a glottal stop rather than that open-mouthed sound. And the reason this matters is all about flow. If you're talking to a British person and you use a loud open-mouthed pause, it can momentarily break their concentration.
They stop focusing on what you're saying, and for a split second, they're focused on how you're pausing. It's a tiny little speed bump in the conversation.
A tiny cultural speed bump. So the advice for a language learner is really practical. You don't need to change your accent, but maybe consider tweaking your thinking sounds to match the local norm.
Just to make the conversation that much smoother.
Exactly. It's about reducing the cognitive load on your listener. You want the conversation to feel easy and comfortable for them, and this is one of those small subconscious things that can make a big difference. Hashtag tag 3.2. Being sensible with sensitive questions.
Okay, shifting from sound back to content. Tip 5 is about a huge potential pitfall. Asking what seems like a perfectly normal, polite question that accidentally causes a lot of pain.
Oh, this is a big one. The risk is that you ask a standard question, like about someone's job, expecting a simple answer.
So how's your job going?
Right. And you get hit with something really difficult. I was just laid off, or I've been unemployed for months and I'm really struggling.
And suddenly you, the questioner, feel awful. And they're forced to talk about something really stressful in what was supposed to be a light social setting. You've built a wall of discomfort instead of a bridge of connection.
The solution, according to the source, is to rephrase your questions to provide an escape route.
An escape route, I like that.
You give the other person the power. You let them choose what they want to share. So instead of a direct question about a specific, potentially sensitive topic,
You give a broad, open invitation. So instead of how's your job, you could say something like, fill me in on your life since I last saw you.
or catch me up on what's been happening,
Yeah.
that lets them decide what to highlight. They can talk about their new puppy, a trip they took, a hobby, or their job if they want to. The choice is theirs.
The source also gave that great alternative specifically for the job question. So what keeps you busy these days?
I love that one. It's so much nicer. It implies they're active and engaged in life without tying their entire identity to their employment status.
Which is just more respectful, really. It acknowledges that people are more than just their jobs.
And there was that interesting comparison between British and American English here, too.
Right. The observation that in the UK, what do you do, is a very common understood question that means, what's your job?
But the speaker found that when they use that exact phrase in the U.S., it sometimes confused people or even sounded a bit aggressive.
As if you were demanding they justify their existence or something?
Exactly. It highlights how much nuance there is in phrasing, even within the same language. The American equivalent might be a softer, what are you working on? Or tell me about your projects.
So by using that escape route phrasing like what keeps you busy, you kind of sidestep all those potential cultural and regional landmines. It's universally polite, hashtag tag 3.3, the necessity of fluency.
And all these strategies we're talking about, they all rely on one foundational skill, which is tip 4,
Fluency.
the necessity of fluency. The core idea is that you have to work on your overall fluency to avoid those gaps and stumbles in the middle of a conversation.
Because those gaps just kill the momentum. They're a source of so much anxiety for language learners, and they're tiring for the listener, too.
When you're struggling for a word, the focus shifts, doesn't it? The conversation stops being about the ideas you're sharing and becomes about the mechanics of you trying to speak.
That's a great way to put it. It's about cognitive load again, not just for the listener, but for you as the speaker.
Right. The source makes the point that if you can improve your fluency, you free up so much mental bandwidth. If you're not spending 90% of your brain power just trying to find the right verb.
Then you actually have the capacity to think about these higher level strategies, to remember to ask a hypothetical or to listen for points of similarity.
Fluency is the platform that all this other great stuff is built on. It's what allows you to move from just surviving a conversation to actually directing it and enjoying it.
And the only way to get there is just consistent practice. The source mentions things like structured online programs, language marathon challenges, basically anything that forces you to integrate all the pieces: grammar, vocabulary, sentence structure on a regular basis.
The goal is to make the act of speaking more automatic, so your conscious mind is free to focus on connection.
Okay, so let's move into our final section. This is a collection of really practical, tactical tips specifically for you if you're learning English.
These are the nuts and bolts, the things you need to know for when you're in the moment and, things don't go perfectly, because they won't.
And that's okay. The key is knowing how to handle those moments gracefully. Hashtag tag 4.1, don't be afraid to ask for repetition. So our first tip here is about something that is going to happen. You're going to miss something. You're going to need to ask someone to repeat themselves.
And how you do that really matters. The advice is simple but crucial. Do not use the same phrase over and over again.
Don't just keep saying what or sorry.
Right. If you do that, it starts to sound like you're not paying attention, and it can really frustrate the person you're talking to. You need to have a few different polite options ready to go.
You need some phrases up your sleeve, as the source puts it. What are some good ones?
Things like, I'm sorry, what was it? Or could you repeat that, please?
Would you mind saying that again? That's a nice, polite one.
Or you can be more specific. Sorry, I didn't catch that last word. What does that mean? That shows you were listening. You just missed one piece.
But the source had an even smarter, more strategic move. A way to handle this before it even becomes a problem.
Ah, yes, building goodwill first. This is brilliant.
It's like a preemptive strike of politeness.
It is. If you know you might struggle a bit, you start the conversation by giving them a compliment. You say something like, I'm learning English and I really like the way you speak. Do you mind if I ask you a few questions about the language you use as we talk?
That is so smart, because it immediately flatters them.
Totally. You've just turned them from someone who might get annoyed into a helpful teacher. They feel good about helping you. You've reframed the whole interaction.
So now when you ask for repetition, it's not a failure on your part. It's part of this collaborative little lesson that you're having together. Hashtag tag 4.2, offering sincere compliments.
Okay, the next mini tip is about compliments. And it makes a really important distinction.
Which is?
The goal is to offer sincere compliments, but to focus them on something other than physical appearance.
Why is that?
Well, for one, compliments about looks can make people uncomfortable, especially in a professional context. But more than that, from a conversational perspective, they're often a dead end.
The source calls it the thank you dead end.
Exactly. If you say, I like your shirt, what can they say other than thank you, and the conversation stops?
Right. But if you compliment something about their personality or their ideas or the experience you just shared,
Then you're opening up the conversation. The source contrasts, saying, oh, you look great today, with saying, wow, I really enjoyed this conversation. It was so interesting talking to you.
the second one is so much more powerful, isn't it? It's validating their mind, their contribution.
It is. And it's a compliment about something you built together. It strengthens the bond between you in a way that a comment about their sweater just can't. It invites them to respond with something like, I enjoyed it too, especially when we talked about. And the conversation continues. Hashtag tag 4.3, talking about emotions and idioms.
And for our final tip, we're wading into some tricky territory for any language learner: emotions.
This is a huge challenge because talking about feelings involves so much subtle, nuanced vocabulary. And maybe even more importantly, it's full of idioms.
And not knowing the idioms can lead to a complete communication breakdown.
A total breakdown. The source gave that classic, almost painful example of the American boss.
Oh, this one's great. So the boss says a coworker is absolutely bombing it.
And the learner hears bomb and thinks of the slang phrase, she is the bomb, which means she's amazing.
So they think the coworker is doing a fantastic job.
And then they're completely bewildered when the boss says, so I need you to take over her project. It makes no sense.
Until they realize that bombing it actually means the complete opposite. It means failing spectacularly.
It's a perfect example of how you can understand every single word in a sentence and still get the meaning 100% wrong because you don't know the idiom.
It just highlights how important it is to specifically study this stuff. The source mentions that there are plenty of resources for positive idioms.
Right, like being over the moon or on cloud nine.
But it makes the excellent point that you need to learn the whole spectrum. Most language courses don't teach you how to express or understand complex negative emotions like disgust or deep frustration.
And if you can't understand or express the full range of human emotion, your ability to have a truly deep, genuine connection with someone is always going to be limited. Hashtag outro outro.
Wow. We have covered a lot of ground today. This has been a really deep dive into the real mechanics of a great conversation. And when you look back at all the tips, hypotheticals, open questions, finding similarity, being sensitive, there's one big principle that seems to run through all of them. It's that your main focus should always be on making sure the other person has plenty of chances to speak. Because fundamentally, people enjoy talking about themselves, their ideas, their lives. And you can use that to your advantage to build a great connection.
That's absolutely it. We've seen that being a great conversationalist isn't about how smart you are or how much you know. It's about how you frame your curiosity. It's a generous act, really. You're strategically and actively encouraging the other person to share, and then being skilled enough to spot and highlight those moments of real connection.
It really reframes it from being a performance to being a partnership.
It does. And that strategic mindset brings us to a final provocative thought for you to take away. We've talked a lot about techniques like hypotheticals that are designed to access someone's deep hopes and dreams.
Right. But we also talked about tip 5, the importance of giving people an escape route on sensitive topics. Asking what keeps you busy instead of the direct, how's your job? So here's the question. If you're constantly and consciously giving people an easy way out of the difficult topics to respect their privacy, are you just being sensitive? Or are you also, maybe, limiting the depth of information that's available for you to build a truly profound connection? So where's the line between being polite and avoiding the very things that create real intimacy? Exactly. Where's that line between sensitivity and genuine engagement? That's the tightrope every great conversationalist has to walk.
A great thought to end on. So go out there and apply these rules, start practicing those what and how questions, and listen. Really listen for those points of similarity. Until next time, keep diving deep.